He belongs to us. When I was a teenager, I lived in a small desert town. A tourist town, really. Think cowboy historic, with lots of old buildings and dust. I was able to make some extra cash babysitting on the weekends, because there wasn't much else to do in the town anyways. One night I was babysitting for a couple that had an infant. I met them at Target. They seemed like a nice couple and knew of another family I sat for. They lived way out of town, so far out that the street names are gone, and you use mile markers as your signs to know where you are. It was an easy gig. Baby was staying asleep, just had to feed him when he woke up. Parents will be back around midnight. I cozied up on the couch with Netflix and settled in for a chill night when the doorbell rang. Thinking it was one of the parents who forgot something, I jumped up and opened the door immediately, to nothing, it seemed. I shrugged and started to close the door when I heard a soft voice. "Miss." I stopped the door and looked around the corner to see a girl standing on the steps to the porch. She was about my age, had long hair and a hoodie pulled up, but her eyes, they were so light blue, they were almost glowing in the dark. Do you live at this house?" she had asked me. "Oh," I started. "No, I'm just visiting." I was careful not to say too much, because although this girl seemed harmless, she was still a stranger. "Is Mrs. Rosino home? I need to talk to her," she asked. She seemed nervous, whittling her thumbs, looking behind me into the house. "You know what? She just stepped out to go to the store. I can tell you stopped by if you tell me your name," I said, slightly backing up, ready to close the door. She stepped towards me, eyes darting around, and she put her hand over the zipper of her hoodie. She leaned forward and whispered, "Please, tell me where she is. I don't want to hurt you." My heart dropped. She removed her hand from her zipper and really looked at me, her eyes pleading. I'm sorry. And she isn't here right now," I said with a tight expression. Her face turned desperate, but at that point, I had been thoroughly creeped out, so I closed the door and locked it. I called the Rosinos to let them know. Once I described the girl, they grew frantically. They told me they were calling the police and to stay with the baby. I still remember Mrs. Rosino screaming onto the phone, "Do not leave my baby," over and over. I ran down the hall to the nursery, threw open the door and ran to the crib. The baby was sound asleep still. I scooped him up gently and sat in the rocker with him in one arm, my phone in the other. "Help will be here soon," I had whispered, more to comfort myself than anything. Then the banging started. I could hear the front door shake from the force used to knock on the wood. Then the sound moved. Why aren't there any sirens? The police station wasn't far from this area at all. Right before you turned on the mile marker, they should be here by now. I heard the banging travel along the house, one big knock at a time. Bang. They were by the living room. Bang. They were by the kitchen. Bang. They were by the hallway. I got out my phone and texted 911 help to my mom. She knew where I was babysitting tonight. She responded immediately with question marks, then tried calling. I silenced the call. I couldn't risk answering and the intruder hearing me. My mom would make sure the police got her. I knew it. Slowly moving closer and closer to where I hid in the nursery, the window was locked tightly, with the blinds closed. But glass is breakable. Bang. They were at the wall next to the window. I backed away from the window to the corner of the room when I heard the front door creak open. The baby boy still asleep in my arms. I started to cry. I whimpered like a wounded puppy. I couldn't fight someone awful holding him, but I wasn't going to put him down. Footsteps descended the hallway. I heard muffled voices while doors were being opened and closed. "Where is the nursery?" a gruff voice asked. "I don't know, Daddy. I couldn't see on the floor plan online," the small voice of a girl from earlier answered. "If that little girl wants to help them, it's fine. But he, belongs to us. No one can keep him from us now. Daddy, please. Maybe she'll understand. The voices stopped right outside the door. The baby started to stir. I shushed him quietly and rocked him back and forth. Then I heard the sirens. I shouted thank you to whoever was watching over me, grateful that this nightmare would be over soon. But the weirdest thing happened. The footsteps didn't retreat. No one ran, no one left, no one moved. I was sure they were going to come in and finish me off right before the police showed up and then steal the baby into the night. But that didn't happen either. Loud footsteps came walking through the house. A boisterous voice called out through the hallway. Excuse me, sir. Are you a resident here? We got a call that a little girl was in trouble. Is she hurt? Muffled voices sounded and trailed off, walking outside. I was waiting to hear anything, yelling, screaming, more sirens, but it was silent. After what seemed like hours, heavy footsteps walked directly down the hallway towards me, and the door opened. A uniformed officer looked stern and took a look at me, cowered in the corner with the Rosino baby. Hey, sweetie, are you alright? He asked, bending down to meet me at eye level. Yes. Those people were trying to take the baby. They were gonna kill me. Why did you take so long to get here? I cried out, finally letting the tear fall as the adrenaline hit was coming down. The officer looked confused. No, we came out the second the call came in. We made it here in about 5 minutes. Did you try to call in sooner? He pulled his radio to his face, asking his other officer if any other calls were attempted. Well, no, but the Rosinos called you at least 30 minutes ago. I called them first, and they said they were calling you right away, and to hide the baby, so... I looked down at the baby Rosino. He had fully woken up and started to quietly cry. The officer just stared at me, a mix of sympathy and fear in his eyes. Where are his parents? They surely should be here by now. He's probably a little scared and needs his mom. Did you arrest those psychos? I patted his back and bounced him in my lap to help comfort him. The officer smiled sadly at me, spoke into his radio. Can you send them in? After a few moments, the nursery door opened and the teenage girl stepped through, with a large man behind her. Oh, the girl started to sob, putting her hands up to cover her face. The older man placed his hands on her shoulder and looked at me sadly. The policeman stood and reached for the baby. No, I shouted. What are you doing? Are you working with them? This is the Rosino's son. The girl finally spoke. No, he isn't. He's mine. There is a needle hunting me. Last year I finished a 4-year residency as part of becoming an emergency medical specialist, aka an ER doctor. Working in a metropolitan hospital, I'd seen a lot of crazy things over time. Shootings, stabbings, freak accidents, and mysterious illnesses, to name a few, but the patient I remember the most was Martha Jennings. Martha had come in originally after police had been called to her home due to noise complaints from neighbors. When the officers arrived, they had found her frantically moving to and fro between a cellar door and a backed-up truck filled with sheets of metal and wood. According to one cop I spoke to later, she had been wringing with sweat, and she yanked an 8-foot sheet of plywood off the truck bed and began dragging it towards the doorway that led underneath the house. She'd barely look up at the officer's arrival, but when they offered to help her carry it down, she accepted, gratefully. The cellar was in chaos, with power tools and cords strewn across the floor from one end to the other. It didn't take long to figure out that Martha was in the process of adding layers to all the walls down there. And not just one layer either. Instead, she was attaching sheets of wood and metal in alternating panels, and in places the layers were already 5 or 6 sheets deep. When the cops casually asked her what kind of project she was working on down there, she had blinked several times before answering, her voice quiet and wavering in between pants of exertion, and she propped the latest board against the wall. I'm making the walls thicker. So it's safe down here when he comes for me. They naturally followed up with more questions, which led to her being brought in for examination. She was brought to the ER first due to concerns that her confusion might be caused by either dehydration, heart stroke, or some kind of bad reaction to medicine. We pulled blood, and I did an initial exam right after she arrived, but I wasn't anything over than her being slightly underweight and looking exhausted. That and her being really pissed off. No, you can't keep me here. You have no right. I haven't committed any crime, have I? I had smiled at her then, both because I wanted to reassure her and because I thought it was a fair question. I knew they had brought her in because she was being disorderly, but I honestly figured that they did it more because they were worried about her and the things she was saying. At the time, all I knew was that she had supposedly been acting crazy and talking out of her head, but looking at her now, fuming but clear-eyed, it was hard to imagine it. No, I don't think you did anything wrong, but, well, I think they were scared something was wrong, that maybe you were sick or weren't feeling yourself. Do you remember talking to the officers that brought you here? She rolled her eyes. Yes, I am not crazy, or if I am, I'm not senile, at least. I laughed. No, no one said you were, but do you mind telling me what you talked to them about? It may just be some kind of misunderstanding. She sighed. Look, I was having a bad day, I ran my mouth, and they took me in for being serious. It was all just a bad joke that got out of hand. She looked down at the wrist cuffs that secured her to the bed. Can you take these off? They're pretty itchy, and I promise you don't need them. Nodding, I unbuckled them as we talked. So, it was a bad joke. Tell me about it. What did you tell them? Rubbing her freed wrist, she scowled. I am renovating the basement of my house. My husband died a few months ago, and I've been trying to keep busy ever since. I guess I was making too much noise. One of my stupid neighbors complained. I was mad because they called the cops, so I made up this silly story just to mess with them. That's all there is. That's all there is to it. She glanced around. So, can I get my clothes back? I'm ready to go now. I shook my head slightly. Miss Jennings, call me Martha, please. I'm not that old. Martha, I can't make the call to release you. When someone is brought in by the police, they have to either sign off on the release or they can take you back when we're done treating you. I understand that this might have all been just a bad joke, like you said, but I'm going to have to talk to them first. She started to argue, and I raised my hand. If you will, tell me what you told them, if you remember. It will put me in a better position to help get you released, if I know what you were talking about, okay? Martha closed her eyes and pushed her head back into the pillow, her lips a thin line of resigned defeat as she began. I told them that there's some kind of alien or magic needle that is hunting me, that I need to make the walls of my basement thick enough that it couldn't get through, even though I didn't know if it would matter. I raised an eyebrow. So, that was your joke, that you thought a magic needle was after you. Glaring at me, she nodded. Yes, it was a bad and stupid joke. Will you please get me released now? I need to get going. As I said, it will be a little while. You're going to wait to see the blood work before we release you. And I don't control what the cops do after that, but I don't mind talking to them and trying to help, like I said. Leaning forward, she stabbed a finger towards me. I'll sue. You understand me? I'm being held against my will, and I will sue. I shrugged. Ma'am, you do what you need to, but I'm telling you, if they arrest you, it's going to be at least another couple of hours before you can get out of here. One way or another. Her eyes widened. No, I can't stay here for that long. You goddamn idiots, you don't. She started to get up, and I raised a hand to stop her. Please don't. They'll just put the restraints back on you, and it'll make it harder for me to convince them that you're okay to go home. Can you try to be patient? I was surprised when she laid back, tears in her eyes. You're killing me. That's what you're doing. You're all killing me. Miss Martha, what do you mean? What are you afraid of? The tests? I can assure you that they're harmless, and no one will do anything. No, you fool, not the tests. Her voice was lower but more strident now, the angry hiss of a snake. The needle. The fucking needle. Her eyes darted around the room as she spoke. I lied before. The needle is real, and it's coming for me. I need to keep moving, or be somewhere protected, not stuck here talking to you. I felt new unease stirring in my belly. She wasn't joking now, and I didn't think she was lying either, which meant she was crazy after all. I almost went and got help right then, but I wanted to know more. Maybe she would tell me something that could help her before they took her away for the 72-hour psych observation. As I could see now, that's the direction this was all heading. Martha, will you tell me what you're talking about? The truth. It's the only way I can help. The woman looked at me for several moments before seeming to make a decision. Scowling, she gave me a shrug. Why not? It won't make you think I'm any more crazy than you already do. And apparently, I have at least a little bit of time to kill. But for the record, this is all a joke. I do not consent to my restraints, and if I'm not released in the next few minutes, you can expect a lawsuit. These words lacked the same energy and conviction that had cackled off her just moments before. In fact, as I watched, she seemed to be deflating, her fear and panic being replaced by a dull, gray sheen of resignation that was somehow worse. I was going to ask if she was okay, but she had already begun. My husband wasn't a bad man. A bit boring and clueless, yes, and too in love with his work to be sure. But not a mean bone in his body. He was passionate about his work. It was all molecular chemistry and metallurgy, and, it was interesting to him, and the paint on the wall. But it paid well enough, especially when he got hired by a hush-hush outfit to work on some secret project. When he first went to work there, I tried getting some details out of him, but he wouldn't budge. Too much work integrity, you see. They said don't tell anything. So, he didn't. That's how I knew how bad things were when he came home 6 months ago, pale and shaking. It wasn't his constant nervous glances. He'd been acting more jittery for a few weeks, and I assumed it was either work stress or because he knew our marriage was heading towards the edge of something that might interrupt the orderly existence he'd crafted for himself over the last 10 years. It wasn't even the fact that he poured himself a drink as soon as he walked in, despite the fact that he never drank more than once or twice a year. It was the fact that he was talking to me. He was telling me things I knew he wasn't supposed to be telling. Him breaking one of their precious rules scared the shit out of me. He said for the last 3 years had been part of Project Arcadia, like a long-term, multidisciplinary study of several objects provided to the group he worked for. When I was asked if it was the government, he just laughed and shook his head. Said I was watching too many movies and was thinking too small, but that didn't matter. What mattered was what happened 2 weeks earlier. What had happened 2 hours before he came home to me, terrified and shaking. And it all came down to the thing that his team had been working on for the past year. They called it the needle. 2 inches long and the width of 5 human hairs. It was a straight line of metal that defied any kind of explanation. For one thing, the metal seemed indestructible. They couldn't even scrape it for a sample, and the tests they could run came back with results that made little sense and gave fewer answers. Second, it appeared to be solid and made of one piece, but all attempts at internal imaging had failed, so they couldn't say for sure. Third, and this is where I started to think he was crazy, the needle floated. It floated. Just floated on its own like a balloon. Though it never raised or lowered itself more than about 4 feet off the ground unless pushed. If you did push it, it would drift away like a floating bar of soap before slowly creeping back to its original spot. I asked him then, kind of making fun of it. I'm honest. If it was from an alien ship or something, he hadn't laughed but only shook his head. Said he didn't know. They were only told to learn what they could about how it worked. But he added, warily, one of his parents had said it had come from some kind of benefactor. That the guy had worked on other objects before and they were all different and all strange. Would have been some kind of mask. I know there was a tissue sample of a tree or something. For a long time he enjoyed working with the needle. They made very little progress, but the chance to work with something so unique was exciting. He started saying longer and longer hours in the hopes of making some kind of breakthrough. He didn't say it, but I think he was afraid he'd be kicked off the project if they didn't get results. Joke was on him, wasn't it? Fuck. That's petty. He didn't know. I don't guess any of them did, but where was I? 2 weeks before my husband told me all this, they were doing a round of what he called a behavioral test on the damn thing, because they had figured out it had some kind of computer in it or something because of how it acted. It was fine with being moved around to wherever, but it wanted to stay in the same height above the ground. They constructed big vertical mazes and it would navigate them. According to Reese, that was my husband, it was just like watching a smart rat after it had memorized a path. They had this fucking thing and they were just playing with it. Like it was a shiny toy. Except one day, when one of the lab buddies, Becker, was pushing the needle into the maze opening, his hand slipped and the needle pricked his finger. Reese said it never should have happened. They had protocols for handling the thing, but they had gotten used to it, which made them careless and sloppy. For a few seconds, they were just laughing nervously at Becker. It sucked his bloody finger. Then they had a terrible screeching sound as the needle pushed its way out of the maze, shot through a nearby wall, and disappeared. They were locked down for the next 12 hours, questioned again and again, while security watched the surveillance video and tracked the trajectory of the needle out of the facility, and it shot through dozens of walls before flying off to places unknown. Well, unknown for the time being. As far as Reese and the rest of them went, there was no sign of them doing anything to cause it other than Becker pricking his finger. The rest of them were reassigned while Becker was asked to remain at the facility for further testing until the investigation was complete. Reese heard about the first of the killings a couple days later. Becker had a grandmother in Arizona. She suddenly dropped dead in the produce department of her local grocery store. The only visible injury, a tiny welt of blood on the front and the back of her head, as though she had been pricked by something. The next day, Becker's high school girlfriend, who he apparently hadn't seen in years, died in a single car accident with no apparent cause for the wreck. By that weekend, his brother and the brother's entire family were found dead in their camper of indeterminate causes. Then it was Becker's college roommate, his parents, his fucking pharmacist. Because of the way the grandmother died, they suspected from the start it was the needle. And while they didn't know why it was doing what it was doing, they began to understand the patterns and the practical effect. It was killing off anyone connected to the man who had pricked his finger on it. 2 hours before he came home, Reese had been talking to one of his old lab partners. They were on a different team now, and it was the first time they talked in a few days. Reese said the first thing that he'd noticed was that Teresa was spilling her coffee. He went to mention it when he realized she wasn't spilling it at all. There was a small hole in the side of her mug, and as the cup fell anyways, he saw blood blooming on her shirt as she fell to the ground. I remember him saying that she shouldn't have died so fast. Nonetheless, it had darted around inside her before flitting away. Again, Reese was killed 2 days after telling me about the needle. His death was a bit more mundane. However, as he was shot to death in a robbery while coming back from the ice machine at the hotel he had checked into that night. Apparently, his employees weren't very happy about him spilling the beans and trying to run away from the killer needle. I'd expect to follow him soon after, but no one ever came. No assassins or black cars following me or whatever it is they might normally do. I moved around for a few days, but I realized there was no point. They could find me if they wanted, and I'd start to figure out that they didn't want to kill me after all. No, they were content to let the needle do that for them while they gathered the data. Another fucking behavioral test. So I'm back home. That's when I got the call that Rory, the man I'd been sleeping with for the past couple of years, had died mysteriously in the shower. Rory, a man that Reese had never met, let alone Becker. That's when I knew that Reese had been telling me the truth. That sometime, somewhere, the needle would be coming for me. That's why I need to get out of here. I tried to keep my expression neutral as Martha finished her story. It was insane, of course, but letting my disbelief and pity show would have only upset her more. So instead I thanked her and told her I needed to finish my rounds, but I would be back shortly. She said something else as I walked away, but I pretended I didn't hear. I kept going. I was on the other side of the ER a few minutes later when I heard Martha begin to scream. Running over, I pushed through a throng of nurses and PAs to see what was bad enough to cause her to scream so loudly for a few seconds before falling silent. My breath caught as I saw her dead eye staring up at the ceiling. The right one red from hemorrhage. I staggered back a step. That's when I noticed her bare foot hanging halfway off the bed. On the bottom of her heel was a tiny drop of blood. When I wiped at it, I saw a small puncture wound there. I was moving back towards her upper body to more closely examine the injured eye when something on the wall behind the bed caught my attention. It was a small hole, and about the width of 5 human hairs. It looked to be lined up perfectly with the top of Martha's head, and when I checked, I found a matching hole in her scalp. I went home early that night. I couldn't get her story out of my head, but worse was the sound of her scream, full of fear and pain as the thing she feared the most found her and pushed its way relentlessly through her body. I checked later. There was no autopsy, no record of who claimed the body or where it went. But it didn't matter. I suspected I knew exactly who had taken it. The next few months were hard for me. I kept waiting for guys in black suits to pay me a visit or to wake up in a dungeon somewhere. I kept my head down, finished my residency, and moved to the other side of the country. When I started my new job, I didn't take more than a day off for the first 6 months. And it was only this weekend that I actually got away with a girl I've been seeing. It's the first time in a really long time that I've relaxed, and when I've got home, I realized I had gone more than 24 hours without feeling scared for the first time in, well, a long time. Laying down in my bed, I felt myself getting drowsy as I stared up on my ceiling. Things were going good with Sydney, and work was fine now that there was a hole in my ceiling. I sat up and looked closer. That hadn't been there before. There hadn't been a hole right over my bed, right over where I laid. I looked around in a panic. There were no sign of anything else being disturbed, but still I stood up and examined my bed. That's when I noticed there was a small hole in my pillow. Though when I picked it up, I didn't go through the other side, as though it realized I wasn't there. It was letting me know that I had been there. Shaking, I grabbed my suitcase again, headed for the bus station, and got on the first one that was going far with frequent stops. Planned frequent stops, at least. Because as I'm writing this on my phone, the bus has pulled over in the middle of nowhere. A flat tire and engine trouble. If you can believe that coincidence, I know I can't. There's no service out here, so the driver is walking back to a spot in the road with the gas station that we passed a couple of miles back. I'm not waiting on that, though. I'm going to start walking in the opposite direction as soon as this is finished. Not because I think I'll outrun it, you understand, but because people get nervous in a crisis, or even just the inconvenience of being stranded for a couple of hours. They want to talk, get to know each other, make connections so they feel more normal and less alone. I'm already terrified about what may happen to Sydney and my Uncle Mike, people I've worked with or I've treated. I don't want more lives on my conscience. So, I'll walk and hope it doesn't find me. That if it does, it will end me. And if it's coming for me, I hope it's soon, because to still remember the last thing Martha said to me as I walked away, pretending I didn't hear. The worst part isn't that it's coming, you see. It's not knowing why or when, that it's out there, taking its time, maybe enjoying itself. Enjoying thinking about when it catches you and pushes a hole right on through. My daughter told me a secret on her way to school. I'd never done the school run before. Work took up practically all my time from Monday to Friday, but in the last week of the summer holidays, my wife's mother passed away. She had gone down south to support her father and help with the funeral arrangements, which left me to hold the fort. As much as I missed her, it's been nice to spend so much one-on-one time with Hilda. She is the spitting image of her mother, and her likeness doesn't stop there. She has the same sharp wit and emotional intelligence way beyond her 6 years. I suppose with me always being at work and Hilda being an only child makes a lot of sense. They spend a lot of time together, especially over the holidays. Hilda was happy to give me directions as I drove her to school. I do know the way, of course, but I enjoyed playing along with the idea that I didn't. So, first day of year 2, I teased. She turned and frowned at me. I could tell exactly what face she was pulling without taking my eyes off the road. What? I laughed. It's year 3, actually? She said, matter-of-factly. No way. When did you get old? She just smiled and turned to look out the window. Daddy? Whenever she had anything to say, Hilda always had to say my name first, then wait for my response. I told her many times that she could just start talking, and I would know that she was talking to me, but it didn't seem to ever sink in. It was cute, if not a little frustrating sometimes. Yes? Was it dangerous when you went to school? That caught me off guard. Dangerous? Yeah. Because of the dinosaurs? She erupted into laughter at her own joke. The sound of it was so infectious. Very funny, I chuckled. Are you looking forward to your first day back? Yeah. Kids, brilliant at carrying conversation. What are you looking forward to the most? She didn't answer right away. I could almost hear the cogs ticking. Playing with my friends. Oh, and my new teacher is Miss Gibson. Lila says she's the best. Lila is Hilda's cousin on my wife's side. She's in the year above. Well, won't you miss your old teacher? No, she responded, so quickly that she must have felt strongly about it. She was the worst teacher. I felt a sudden pang of guilt. My own daughter had suffered a year with the worst teacher, and I had no idea? Well, how was she the worst? I prodded. She was always cross. She didn't like fun. She told me off when I cried. Oh, well, that's not very nice. On the last day of school, I played a trick on her. Hilda giggled to herself and shot me a mischievous smile. That's my girl, I thought. It was Charlie's idea, she continued. We were in the art hut, and she went in the cupboard where the pens and papers are, and I locked the door. I laughed. I remember doing something familiar back in my school days. That way, Hilda shouted, leaning forward in her seat, pointing down the road that led to her school. I'd seen it coming a mile off, but had chosen to pretend that I hadn't. Hilda was looking very pleased with herself. I parked as close as I could to the school gates, which was not close at all. My wife had complained about the school drop-off before, but it was even worse than I had imagined. I walked Hilda down the pavement into the school gate. I gave her a big hug and kissed her on the forehead. Have a great day. I will, she chirped, then ran off to join a line of other kids about her size. I watched her for a while, finding her friends, talking about whatever little kids talked about. Always smiling. My attention turned to the teachers. They all looked stressed. They weren't even pretending to be happy about back at work. Hilda glanced over at me. I gave her a wave and made my way back down the pavement. A group of moms filled the pavement ahead. 2 pushchairs causing a barricade. They seemed engrossed in serious conversation, or serious gossip. I couldn't tell which at a distance. As I got closer, I overheard little snippets of information. Mrs. Baker didn't show up to teach the year 2s. She's not answering her phone or anything. I heard she wasn't at the teacher training day either. A friend of mine is her neighbor. She said she hasn't seen her all summer. I stopped in my tracks. A wave of dread rushed over me. Mrs. Baker, the year 2 teacher, Hilda's teacher last year. I turned back towards the school and marched up to the gates on wobbly legs. The children had all gone inside. I walked up to the reception and tried to calm my breath. Hi, I'm Hilda's dad. She left her coat in the art hut before the summer holidays. My wife asked me to get it back. I just about managed to get out the words. Yes, of course, the chirpy receptionist replied. It's just around the left side of the building. It's not been opened yet, so here's the key. Just drop it back whenever you're done. You can leave it open. She smiled, a bright, over-friendly smile, and returned to her work. It's a coincidence, I kept telling myself as I walked around the left side of the building. The art hut was one of those temporary classrooms, almost like a static caravan, but more basic. The walls were a rough texture, painted navy blue, and it had a flat, felt roof. My stomach was in knots as I approached the door. The keys jingled in my unsteady hand. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight, casting long rectangles across the room. My eyes swept about the place, then focused on the desk. A head bag sat upon its surface. Hilda's words echoed through my mind. I played a trick on her. I locked the door. My heart raced as I looked to what I assumed was the storage cupboard. I walked slowly towards it, my feet barely leaving the floor, my mind expecting the worst and trying to reassure me at the same time. I tried the door. Locked. Please, no, I whispered to myself. I turned the latch. The door swung open by itself. The sound came first, the wet thack against the carpet, then the smell. I leapt back, gagging, covering my face with my hands as my breakfast sprayed out from between my fingers. As much as I didn't want to look, I couldn't look anyway. She was curled in a ball, holding her knees to her chest. I guess she had been leaning against the door. Her skin was brown and leathery, wrapped tightly around her bones. Her white summer dress was stained with large, wet blotches of yellow and brown. She was dead because of my poor, sweet, innocent Hilda. A childish joke with severe consequences. I sobbed uncontrollably as I burst back outside. What would I say? What would it do to Hilda if she found out? If I tell the truth, everyone will know. If I lie, I just so happened to discover the body while looking for Hilda's coat, then what? It wouldn't take long for questions to be asked. Who locked the cupboard? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.